you're an entrepreneur.
Yep.
You're CEO of Qualigence.
Yep.
All right. So what I'm curious about is what even got you to this point?
Doing it wrong for 21 years.
I love it. So to start this off, I love it. So thank you all again for joining us. I hope you enjoy the laughter as we get started today for our MISHRM Resource Partner Podcast. Happy that you came back. I'm your host, Greg Coyne, and here is a very special guest with me, Steve Lowisz with Qualigence International.
That's
I know.
right.
Been practicing all this time to get it right.
Nobody gets the name right. You got it right. Kudos to you, Greg.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. Steve is the CEO of Qualigence, and I'm very happy to have him today. I'm even more happy because I like for HR professionals and leaders to be able to see someone who owns a company. But before we even get started with that and go down that road, what I'd really like to have you have an opportunity to talk about is what is Qualigence International all about?
People.
Okay.
Simple. It's, we started with the foundation of helping people attract people. And think about what's going right now with the Great Resignation and not being able to find enough people.
Yeah.
But here's the reality of that, Greg. That's actually pretty easy. Okay. Finding people, even in this economy, is not the hardest thing to do. Retaining people, putting people at the center of every business, and helping figure out a way to drive their performance, that's the challenge. Those are the three buckets that Qualigence operates in.
I like it. So here's the thing, and I guarantee you've heard it from many business owners, HR professionals. Retention is a huge, I would even call it like just a key word right now. And people, you hear it all over the place.
Always.
So a couple things. What are some of the things you've noticed that, and I'm not saying HR professionals, but companies themselves are doing both, I would say, badly to be even to get to you, and what do you see as some things that are exceptional, just, and you don't even have to name companies, that you see for people to retain that talent?
So let's kind of take a look at what's going on right now, right? Yeah. The great resignation. Yeah. I don't think COVID caused it. I think it exaggerated problems that were already there.
I'd agree.
So let me kind of use that as the framework behind this.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is I think the problems that existed with retention were there before COVID happened. Sure. COVID just made them a bigger issue.
Sure.
Beanbag chairs are great for a day. Additional compensation is good until it's not anymore. Mm-hmm. It's not enough anymore. Work from home, it's kind of a standard thing, this hybrid situation.
Yeah.
All of those are important. I'm not saying they're not, but they don't fix the problem that we're having. So to me, this whole idea of retention, if you value your people as much as companies say they do, they don't look at all those other ancillary things like the beanbag chairs and all that. What they do is look at the individual. And this retention game, to me, it's not a team sport, it's an individual sport. And I think leaders get that wrong. Yeah. I think if we focus on the person and try to identify what the person needs to be the best version of themselves, retention eventually fixes itself. But when we're throwing all these problems at the symptoms, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a big cut that you have and hoping that it solves the problem, but yet your arm's falling off, right? It's like, let's reattach the arm.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're doing that. So I think the companies that are focusing on one-on-one engagement, and it's hard, it's difficult, it takes time, I think those are the companies that are being successful. I think the companies that are trying to make all these other pieces the primary fix to the problem, I think they're doing it wrong.
I like hearing that and I want to circle back on this part because I've heard it a lot from leaders. They all think, and being in the sales space, a lot of times it's always the instant answer of, it's all about money, Greg. It's all about money. And you and I both know it's not. And I want to circle back to that because I have some ideas that you have some ideas about motivation. What really motivates those individuals, all right? But before I do, what I do want to find out is, people are like, wow, Steve gets it. Like he's heard some of what is happening, both from a leadership and from an HR professional standpoint. You're an entrepreneur. Yep. You're CEO of Qualigence.
Yep.
All right. So what I'm curious about is what even got you to this point?
Doing it wrong for 21 years.
All right, elaborate. What do you mean?
So up until 9 years ago, people were a means to an end for me. Now, I wouldn't admit it,
Okay.
but that's really how I ran the businesses. All the businesses that are part of the Qualigence umbrella, and there's four right now, really. Okay. As long as I could get something from them, I wanted the best for them. Well, it doesn't sound bad. I want the best for them as long as I can get. It's manipulation. Yeah. When you want the best for somebody because they can become the best version of themselves, and maybe on the back end there's something that they can do better for the organization, it's a different mindset. Now it's about the individual and what they can do for them, not about just manipulating them to get what I want. And I think too many business leaders don't understand the fine line between influence and manipulation. And we often put one foot in manipulation and the other foot in influence and think we're okay. But when we cross that line and we start making decisions based on what we get out of it, I think we've lost it as a leader. And that's causing a lot of the issues that we have today.
I like hearing that. And so let me ask, because and forgive me, I don't know if I heard it in there, but I'm kind of curious. A lot of experience in understanding, what you may have been doing wrong or the perception of it for yourself. And it's brave to be able to admit
that was horrible.
It was
horrible, man. Greg, you would never have wanted to work for me. And most of my team that's been with me through all of this, they would never want me to go back there again, ever.
So tell me, what was the catalyst then? Because I feel like there's a tipping point.
9 years ago, I got to a point personally and professionally that I felt like I was losing everything. Because we were so successful for so long. The company continued to be successful, but turnover went up. My relationship with my family and friends, my wife was going to the crapper. All of that was happening, and that's really was the catalyst to say, wait a minute, my personal life is spilling over to my business life because really there's no separation. The whole person shows up for work, Greg. You and I both know this, right?
Bingo.
And I had to look at both of those and say, okay, if they're both falling apart, what's the common denominator? It's easy to blame somebody else. It's easy to blame your team. It's hard to look in the mirror, the mirror that we were just talking about that nobody can see. Right? It's hard.
It's right there.
It's hard to look in the mirror and say, I really got this wrong, and I've been doing it all for me. Not always negative in intention, but the result of the way I did it was me. So it was literally 9 years ago, just a few weeks ago, that I had this realization after an experience in the desert of all places. We won't get into that today. And I'm
like, there's another time for this. I like it.
It's a journey of journeys, I will say that. But when I came back from that, I've really been focused on, okay, what were all the things that I learned, both from a leadership perspective as an entrepreneur, leadership perspective as an HR person, and bringing those together along with my relationships and my personal life and all of that. And by the way, I've been married for 30 years, so it's working.
Congrats.
But I brought all that together and was able to start using that within the organization and then teaching others to do the same thing, that not to do all the things that I did.
Wow.
When I did them so poorly.
Yeah. So here's a couple things then. You talked about it, and it's fascinating too because you talk about your journey as well, and it's individual. And you spoke a moment ago about how leaders think it could be, that retention is a group think matter, so to speak, instead of looking at each individual.
Yeah.
All right. So with regards to retention, what are some of those motivating factors or some of the things you've seen that really get people started and going and continuing?
So I think everybody's different.
Sure.
I think the goal here is to figure out what drives each person professionally and personally.
Nice.
And having that conversation. But if you just say, Greg, what drives you personally and professionally? It's going to be a pretty broad answer. Not that you wouldn't share it with me, but it's going to be pretty broad. So what we've learned to do is actually say, here's some things to think about. Time at home, feeling connected at work. What does that mean to you, Greg? Define it for me.
Nice.
Because when somebody says, I'll give you an example. Somebody says, what's most important to me is career advancement. What's your definition of career advancement? What is it?
Oh, for me?
Yeah.
Well, in my organization, it's eventually to get to a partnership status.
Okay.
All right.
What if mine is just to be perfect in the role that I have right now, and you start taking me down the path where you're trying to go with being a partner in your organization? There's a disconnect.
Huge
right
problem.
intention. But think about this. Right intention, because I said career advancement is the thing, or you said career advancement is the thing, but you're taking me down a path that means career advancement to you, not to me.
Right.
So as leaders, if we don't understand that specific, how does that person define that in their own measurable way? That's why I'm saying leadership, especially around what we're talking about, right? These motivational areas. It's an individual sport, not a team sport. You got to connect with the individual before you create the team.
I like
If
that.
you're trying to do everything for the team, you're going to miss too many individuals.
So it's almost like, we'll use your sports analogy. It's think of it as a tennis match as opposed to a football team. You know, they're
Initially, we want to create the team because you still have the dynamic of the team.
Good.
So you got to think about this. But if I'm the kicker's coach, I'm going to spend all my time with the kicker on the football team.
Sure.
Right? But eventually that kicker becomes part of the broader team. So there's two dynamics that are going on here. One is the connection with the individual to understand all of their drivers the way they define it. Mm-hmm. Now take that and put it in the context of a whole bunch of people with different drivers. Challenge.
I like
challenge.
it. I like
and
it.
that's where HR really has to work with their leaders, because I don't think most leaders understand that, because they're looking at it as the football team's all working together, not all the individual pieces that make the football team work.
I like this. Now let me segue with that, because this is this hits close to home for me, because I've heard it a few times, and I know that when people talk to Alana Nickel, who's with Sandler Training as well as myself, people come to us and say, "Oh yeah, you guys are trainers, all right?" And we both know that's not okay.
Yeah.
It's a segment of what we do.
Sure.
It's not the whole component.
Yeah.
Same, I will bet, and I know I've heard it for Qualigence in the sense of, "Oh yeah, you guys are a recruiting
firm.
Yeah.
Well, let's face it. When we started this business, I started in 1999. Our focus was on talent attraction, so recruiting, sourcing, research, of which we still do today under a non-commissioned consulting hourly model. So think
Nice.
about it that way.
I like it.
But as I said, that part is actually not rocket science. Attracting talent, recruiting talent is actually not the hardest thing in the world. Selecting out of that pool is a challenge. Engaging people out of that pool is a challenge. Creating an environment where people actually succeed from that pool are the challenges. So really, Qualigence is three different pieces. It's let's find them. Again, let's put them at the center. Now let's grow them and grow the people around them like they're leaders. So there's a training component here.
Yeah.
It's really recruiting, using data and analytics to make decisions, and providing the tools necessary to a leader to become a better leader, to engage their people, retain their people, and drive the performance of their people, which does what? Drive the performance of their business.
So let me ask, it's a loaded question, because we hear tons of leaders who feel that they're doing a great job where they're at right now.
Yeah.
All right. They've got what they feel is a solid team, but then you're brought in, maybe to let's just stick with the recruiting part. That's how they lead in. They're like, oh yeah, we need people. All right. And then you start taking an objective viewpoint of what's happening, and you see some leaks in the boat, so to speak, from a standpoint of leadership. What do you see as the biggest hurdle, especially from those who have been doing it a long time and have, how do I say it, similar to how you positioned it, except less aware, meaning they're making mistakes, they're manipulating the situation, they're doing it for them, and when you get to them, you see it from a recruitment standpoint, okay, we can hire the people, but that's not really the problem.
Yeah, the retention is the problem.
Right.
Because you can keep them coming in the front door,
Yeah.
but if they're running out the back door, we still have a problem. Again, we've triaged it, we've put a Band-Aid on it, but the turnover often, when you're hiring more people, actually gets exacerbated. The problems don't change, but they get bigger because you're bringing in more people who come in realizing, oh crap, there is a bunch of problems at this particular organization. And I think it kind of falls into two buckets. One, I don't think leaders are trained to be leaders. I think most leaders are trained to be managers.
Yes.
And there's such a difference, process versus people. And that connection to people, I think, goes way under the radar. And how do you develop a relationship with people? I ask this question all the time. I actually turn the table. Right?
No.
Do you want to? If people were reporting to you, do you want fans or friends?
Fans or friends?
Yeah.
I would think, ooh, wow, this is a tough question. I didn't think I'd be put on the spot like this. I'm going to answer it wrong, but I'll say fans, because even though I've got friends, I would hope that fans would tell me what's really happening, and we'd have a combination.
So, right idea, flip them. So here
okay.
let's think about it. If you're a fan of LeBron James, you're going to think, well, everything LeBron does is awesome, right? Because you're never going to get a chance to meet him probably anyways, right? But you would hope a friend, when you ask them for feedback or you see them doing something they shouldn't be, a real friend would take them aside and say, hey, Greg, you know what, that's really not a cool thing to do. At least that's what I would do with a friend.
I got it.
So there's this idea around leadership, which is one of the problems. You can't get too close to your people. I think that's a bunch of BS.
Agreed.
Because if you create a bunch of fans who follow you while you're doing great, who turn their backs when you're not doing well, that's not a friend. They won't be a friend to you. You're not being a friend to them. Right? You can't be honest. And I think that's a misunderstanding on the leadership side. I think that's one of the big issues that's happening that's causing the turnover right now. I think the other big one still sits with leadership, but the company says, we're going to grow this year, Greg, at 30%. Everybody agrees 30% is the way to do it.
Yeah.
But then you start digging under the covers of how do you think you're going to do the 30%? And if I take the CEO, the president, the COO, and the CFO, and SVP of Ops or whoever, and I bring them together and I say how, I'm going to get 5 different answers.
You're right. Absolutely.
So what happens when you have 5 answers? The people you're recruiting, the expectations you set. You got 5 different people with 5 different understandings. There's no clarity to the team. The team realizes it once they join you, and they're out.
Yeah.
People don't want to be somewhere where they're not clear. They don't want. I think it's a false assumption that our job as leaders is to make our people happy.
I can agree with that.
To grow our people.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're going to make them unhappy in order to grow them by being clear about the objectives and goals and then giving the support to get there. But our job, my role as a friend, if you and I are friends, my role is not to always make you happy, Greg.
Correct.
It's to help you get better.
Yeah.
Your role is to help me get better.
Yeah.
We don't approach the workplace from that same perspective.
I love it. And I would say this, because I know we're getting close to time, but one thing I want to ask you is, you've given everyone online, and I appreciate this, a ton of stuff to take with them. If there is one thing that you'd be saying to an HR leader right now that can help them grow themselves, their business, that you haven't touched on just yet, what might that be?
I think it is actually, there's a triangle that I use. And I think it's, as HR leaders, we've got to grow ourselves and we've got to grow our leaders before we try to get to know our team and grow our team.
I like it.
I think you have to do it in that order. If you don't, we have a real challenge. And from an HR perspective, I think HR folks have the largest influence on leaders from that perspective. But we get it wrong. We'll go right to, let's bring all these developmental programs in. I don't think that's what we should do. I think we, as HR leaders, we got to first look at ourselves, influence our leaders to grow. Then we get to know our people and teach our leaders how to know our people, and then we can actually grow our people, and the triangle works. Without that triangle, I don't think it works.
No.
I've seen it. I've experienced it.
What was it? The old adage, I've seen it a zillion times. Even Sandler uses triangles. I was in a fraternity that we use triangles. It's all about, it's usually the points that put it together that hold it, but it's usually the inside that allows it to fall apart. So
yeah, and the only other thing I would say from an HR perspective is I think HR professionals are often the ones that get kicked the most because
Agreed.
It's turnover. It's got to be your fault. BS. Look in the mirror if you're a leader before you go to your HR person.
Yeah.
And then ask them for help to become a better leader. I think you'll solve the majority of your problems.
Love it. I love it. Now, before we part ways, one last thing. Tell those that are watching us how they're able to get a hold of you.
Well, there's really 2 ways. You can look me up on social, just Steve Lowisz, Lowisz, or my personal cell, 734-837-8500. It's everywhere. I've had the same cell number for everywhere. Text me, message, I don't care.
I love it.
You're welcome to get a hold of me.
Steve, I want to have you back. Thank you so much for being here. It's my pleasure. I can't wait to have you on again.
Next time there'll be no mirror in our studio.
I certainly
just for the record.
We won't reference to it at all. People will be like, how do we know the difference?
Don't ask why there's a mirror in this room.
No, as a matter of fact, call Steve, ask the question, he'll know you watched. I love it. I love it. Steve, thanks so much. And thank you all for being on the MISHRM Resource Partners Podcast. We look forward to seeing you next time. And until then, I'm Greg Coyne signing off. Thanks again.